I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media. And today on the Crypto Coin Show, we have Lomesh Dutta, the VP of Growth of the Dfinity Foundation. Lomesh, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Ashton. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on. We recently had on Dominic, the chief scientist of the Dfinity Foundation, and it seems like there's a lot of growth going on in the protocol right now, and it's hard to keep up with all of the different blockchains and different narratives that are growing in the industry, and it seems like it's moving really quickly so far in 2023. So excited to dive into what your team's been working on recently and the growth of some of the decentralized applications that are being built on top of the internet computer. So let's just start from the top level for those who aren't familiar with the intricacies of the differences of all these different layer one protocols and about Dfinity and why it's special. So if you could just start with sort of what is Dfinity working on and what is its sort of competitive advantage in the industry and why is it gaining so much traction so far?
Awesome, yeah, happy to. So I think Dfinity is basically the foundation that helps steward our major contributor to the Internet Computer Protocol. So the blockchain is Internet Computer or ICP. So what makes ICP or Internet Computer extremely different than any other blockchain out there is so let's take a step back. Let's think about what a blockchain typically does, right? So when Bitcoin came in, the key idea was it essentially provided a ledger where you can store like an account of who owns how many Bitcoins. So that's like what it's like a ledger which gives you the ownership of digital assets. Then came, like after a bunch of attempts, came Ethereum. The key idea for Ethereum was it is not just one asset, but you can write these smart contracts, which are nothing but simple programs, which can allow you to create more and more digital assets, tokens, which represent like different protocols like Uniswap or Unitoken or Comp token, so on and so forth. But the ledger or what blockchain does, it's still about like maintaining a ledger for who owns what tokens with a very limited amount of metadata. For example, it could contain a URL of an NFT that you're storing off chain, but it's like just that bit of information is on the blockchain. There are a lot of layer ones. Pretty much all of them have a very similar philosophy. Like on the blockchain, it's a ledger to give you like a token ownership. And they're all trying to scale that like vertically and trying to see how many new transactions can you kind of add in a block, or how fast can you execute transaction, and so on and so forth. What the Internet Computer is doing is extremely different than any of those layer one blockchains. We started with the question is like, can a blockchain be used to do a lot more? When I say a lot more, can it be used to run general purpose software completely on chain? So the idea is like you have an ability to create end-to-end software, whether it's a game, a metaverse, a social network, an enterprise application, where 100% of the application, including all the data, all the assets, the application logic, the entire application is actually built on a blockchain. So this is very different than like a ledger, which essentially keeps an account of token ownership. We obviously, the Internet Computer does that, and we have ledgers where you have tokens and whatnot, but you also have everything else that is required to run an application, and the computation power it needs is all on chain. So hence it's very unique. Now I'll come to in a second like why that is important and why should you even care. But I think that is the key premise of what we started with as a vision for the Internet Computer. Now, one of the things, so we took some very interesting architectural choices on like why this is possible on the Internet Computer and not possible, let's say, anywhere else, is all of the nodes of the Internet Computer are essentially operated by independent parties spread over the globe. They run out of like dedicated data centers, which again are operated by independent parties, have nothing to do with like our foundation and so on. But what that ensures is like these machines are really like advanced machines which are running out of data centers. So guarantees us that we have a very high throughput. So like for example, imagine a bandwidth of like 10 gigabytes per second. And these machines also have an ability to like store, like they have memory to actually be able to store data and so on and so forth. So given the nodes are there, and this was an architectural choice, then we said, okay, we then eventually like organize these nodes into what we call as subnets. And in our world, you might have heard subnet from like different chains and stuff, but in our world, the subnets are extremely different. Our subnets are basically, you can connect like a certain number of nodes to form a subnet, but the beauty is any subnet can talk to any other subnet as if it's just one part of the same network. So what Internet Computer is not one blockchain, but it's comprised of lots of different subnets, each comprised of a few nodes, and then they are interconnected in a very seamless way. So you can literally horizontally scale the network infinitely. So you just keep on adding nodes, keep on forming subnets, and any subnet can talk to any other, and you have a infinitely scalable network which is horizontally scaled.
Wow. Very interesting. Thank you for explaining that, Lomesh. And obviously, scalability is important if these operating systems and the applications are going to start having millions of users on them. But of course, having good applications that people are using on something like Internet Computer is obviously integral to the growth of it. Imagine having the Apple or Microsoft operating system, but there's no applications. You can't do very much on the OS if there's no apps to actually run. And I think that's where some of these blockchains are at with, they're trying to find that, at least developers that are developing on those protocols are trying to find an app that is ready for people to start using, by the millions. And I've seen that there's a few applications that are already kicking off on Dfinity that are getting a lot of growth. And I want to sort of dive into those. But could you talk a little bit about obviously you laid out the infrastructure there. Now about the applications and like creating them easily or onboarding Web 2 developers or moving Web 3 developers from other protocols, how easy is it for them to start developing with Dfinity and get their applications out there and easily used by people?
Sure. So in terms of like the Internet Computer, so as one of the things that I explained earlier was like it is essentially comprised of like a bunch of different nodes that we connect to form subnets, and you can kind of scale like that. Then each of the subnet hosts these what we call as canister. These are essentially like smart contracts on the Internet Computer. So what you can do in these canister smart contracts is you can essentially host your code as well as data. Our execution environment is WebAssembly, which is essentially web standard. Which means you can essentially write in any language that compiles down to WebAssembly. So today, a lot of programmers, they come from, let's say, the Rust background, they write in Rust. We have our own homegrown language, which is very easy and simple for people to learn, as what we hear from developers. It's called Motoko. Lots of similarities with JavaScript. So majority of the people building today are using these languages. Additionally, we have community developers. What they have done is they have essentially created, think of them as like higher level languages where they have started the ability for people to actually write these canisters or smart contracts using TypeScript, which is essentially JavaScript, and Python. So anybody can actually come and write like essentially smart contracts on Internet Computer with any of these high level languages as well.
Okay, that's great to know. And I would expect that down the road, and there will be decentralized applications for almost every kind of use case and industry. But I feel like we're a long way from mainstream adoption of most of the population. Looking at what's hot right now, what are some of the main niche industries and use case applications that are already being launched on Dfinity and already being used?
Yeah, so I think so. If you think about it, like what's happening in the world of blockchain, and like let me just like deconstruct a little bit of like what do you even mean by an application in the blockchain world, and then I'll give you some examples of Internet Computer. So if you typically look at when people say this is an application running on a blockchain, like typically what that would mean is that the application is not on the blockchain, the real, like, so let's say if you're trying to say, let's pick a popular service like StepN or all these step counting applications, or maybe games and metaverse that people are claiming are running on chain. What in reality, what is happening is these applications reside outside of the blockchain, right? The entire application, the logic, this is not living on the blockchain. And what the blockchain simply does is essentially provide a ledger where you can show the moment of like token transfers and whatnot. In our world, these applications are actually truly being built on chain. So what that means is, like, you could actually build systems end to end, which could be governed by the token holders. So the community could basically be given voting rights in the form of tokens, and they can decide everything from, like, so let's say they could vote, and then as soon as a vote proposal is accepted, it could trigger a code chain which could actually update the application. Because like, imagine you being able to influence what would a social network do, what would a game do. You can really evolve the game based on the voting. As soon as the voting is finished, this DAO votes and it triggers a code chain, and your code gets updated. So given that, what we are seeing in our world is actually quite a few different attempts than what you may experience elsewhere. So for example, people on the internet computer are building things like no-code platforms, which means that you can actually create like front ends and back ends on the blockchain without, like, I mean, just similar to how they exist in the Web 2 world. There's like a Web 3 avatar where you can do this. People are writing search engines, which is like for Web 3. People are writing decentralized versions of GitHub. They're also building social network, chat applications. And the intention for all of these products is that they could be governed by the community of token holders. So in terms of, I'll give you a couple of themes of the kind of applications we are seeing. So we have seen a very strong traction with people building social products. So a couple of them are Discover, Distrikt, OpenChat. What these products have, like, already more than hundreds of thousands of users, and they offer very unique abilities. So you can, like, the experience for end user is very simple. It's like you just open a browser, type in a URL, and you can, like, either authenticate with like internet identity, which you, as you mentioned, you have tried to create one, or you can even we have a community developers like nfid, which can allow you to authenticate even with Google, and you can just start using this, let's say, Reddit style social network. And these networks then enable you to do things like you can create communities which are gated by tokens. So if you have a certain NFT, you can be a part of the group, you can receive airdrops. All of those things are all happening on the network. The other set of like use cases that we are seeing are on the side of decentralized finance. So the DeFi also on the internet computer has a lot of interesting aspects. So very recently we announced that we did a direct integration with Bitcoin without involving any bridge. What that means is that the smart contracts on the internet computer, they have an ability to receive native Bitcoin. They can hold that Bitcoin, and they can also send that Bitcoin. So they can sign a Bitcoin transaction from the internet computer. It does not involve any bridge or any intermediary to create these wrapped assets. It's like direct native Bitcoin that we can kind of hold on chain. We are doing the same for Ethereum. So what these things are enabling for us is, like, people are building cross-chain decentralized finance applications, which would bring in, let's say, EVM compatible chains, Bitcoin. All of these assets could then be, let's say, you can build a lending protocol where you can stake real Bitcoin and start earning yield on it. You can create a decentralized exchange which can essentially enable you to trade between Bitcoin and ICP today, but tomorrow, imagine any ERC20 asset could be traded with Bitcoin and amongst each other. So this cross-chain is quite a bit. And I would say another theme is the games and metaverse, because people feel that not just an NFT is living on chain, but you can imagine your entire game on chain. So people are thinking about, how about the level 7 of my game, the entire level, the entire playable experience is actually an NFT. If you're a Twitch person and you are playing or doing a gameplay, your entire gameplay can be minted and sold as an NFT, because imagine everything on chain. So these are some of the, I wanted to just give you a flavor of the kind of things that we're seeing.
Yeah, very cool, Lomesh. And thank you for explaining, in pretext to that, about some of the applications that are blockchain applications, not necessarily actually on the blockchain, more just, as you mentioned at the beginning, just a ledger of the token transactions. But the application itself is sort of hosted on Web 2 or in Amazon. It's really not on the blockchain. I think part of that has been the fact that, in some of these chains, like Ethereum, the transactions are, they're not the cheapest and fastest as they can be. Some of these more next generation protocols like Dfinity are making it faster and cheaper. But from the developers that were working on Ethereum, it just wasn't feasible to have, especially a metaverse or a giant game all on chain. It seems like it's still at the point where it's very slow and buggy and things like that. Looking at developing applications like you're mentioning here, these social platforms where there's already hundreds of thousands of users, that's great to hear on the protocol. How do you lower those barriers to entry so that once you've checked off the boxes that the application is running smooth and fast actually on the chain, how do you ensure that people don't need to understand about the intricacies of Dfinity protocol and their wallet and all of those things, so that you can move from hundreds of thousands of users on a social platform to tens of millions of people that were not exposed to blockchain or cryptocurrency at all prior to joining in this social platform on Dfinity?
Yeah, actually, so that's exactly the direction we are headed, and like it's like some of the work that we as a foundation is doing. Also, we are like extremely happy to have a really vibrant community of builders who are coming up with like really creative ways in which you can kind of solve some of these problems. So I'll give you an example, right? So when the internet computer created, we made very specific architectural choices. We said we do not want users to have a wallet and have tokens in it to interact with the applications, right? So that like, I mean, your grandma is never going to do it. So if you think about it, typical interaction with blockchain would require something like a MetaMask. You need to have ETH, you need to pay for gas, and so on and so forth. So our choice is like, you do not need to. It's a reverse gas model. So what that means is like the developers pay a very small fee for hosting and running their application, but the end users don't need to pay anything. They can just use the social network. They are interacting with the blockchain. They are interacting with the smart contracts. Only the time when they want to do a transaction, that's the time they of course need something which has value, because they need to send that money. So they need a wallet only when they actually need to trigger a transaction. But let's say if you're a social network, you want to like anything that you do, whether you like a post or a retweet something, all of those in our world are smart contract interactions. But these are free for users. The other thing that some of our community members are doing is they are doing things like building on our internet identity, which is WebAuthn based authentication mechanism, highly private, and like it's so. For example, if you're using one application, the other application would never know that you use the same like account or principal to use that. So the key idea is that people are experimenting with allowing, let's say, Google authentication. So you could essentially ride on top of like internet identity, but you could basically have your like Gmail credentials or Google credentials verify, and your credentials still live on your device. It's never going to Google servers, but they have come up with like really smart ways in which how you can authenticate to these applications without any like early barriers. So today you can actually log into these applications in a simple browser. Just type in a URL. You do not need to have any wallet. You do not need to know anything about internet computer. Just log in with Gmail and start interacting. It is happening even today.
Wow, that's great to hear. And yeah, in the past, I think it's been a big barrier to entry, and hopefully that only just continues to lower, to just not have to worry about that wallets and MetaMask and all those things you talked about. Just log in with your email and you're there, you're in the blockchain. And it's sort of very interesting in the two types of different applications that you're talking about. One of them being on the social media side, which is more casual, and one being on the DeFi side, which is more finance, and that's a lot of people are getting into blockchain and cryptocurrency for that reason. And I'm curious, being the VP of growth, looking at what sort of use cases are growing quickly on the blockchain. I feel like because finance is sort of where the money's at, a lot of people are gravitating towards there first, not on the social platforms. And I've seen over the last 6-7 years, following different social media platforms that try to create a decentralized platform that's more fair and build that network effect, so that the hundreds of millions of people that are already using Web 2, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram can actually move to a platform that we need right now, that provides more ownership of the data and your personal information to the users of the platform, because it's a mess in Web 2 right now. But nobody seemed to have done it right. And there's been many platforms over the years I've followed, and they all seem to die. And it sounds like so far these social media platforms on internet computer are already doing really well with hundreds of thousands of users. What's the key to ensuring that it doesn't fall off a cliff like the ones in the past, and that it continues to move to tens of millions and hopefully brings in that network effect from Web 2 social media to be something that people use regularly?
Yeah, so I think in order to kind of solve that problem, you need to take a step back and try to analyze why some of those platforms didn't scale as much as we would have hoped, and so on. Right. So if you look at any end user perspective, you and I, right? I mean, there are different motivations on why we do stuff, right? So some people do stuff for ideological motivations, then there's incentive which are financial, and so on. I mean, while there have been several for example, attempts at search engines which have tried to outbeat Google, focused on privacy and so on, but none of them have even reached 0.1% of the scale of Google, even at that much, right? Mm-hmm. And we keep on saying that, hey, Facebook is not really good for you and it has all the data. Still, Facebook continues to have billions of DAU and so on, right? So these some of these ideological motivations in my mind can get you so what, right? Mm-hmm. But if you think about what happened in DeFi is super smart, right? So there is an incentive, there's a financial incentive for people to basically take a certain action, and that really led to explosive growth of everything. Mm-hmm. Now imagine if you could blend the two, which is what we are already starting to see with some of the people in our world are doing. I'll give you a couple of examples. Imagine in the chat application, if you have an ability to send Bitcoin, as if, for example, the way you send money on Facebook Messenger or iMessage, similarly, if you could send Bitcoin or ICP around, or all of these assets around to your friends, without them having to worry about creating a wallet, without them having to do anything. Imagine a chatbot, in the same chat service, where you can say, hey, take my basically dollars, convert it in from fiat to crypto, whatever, but give me Bitcoin. They don't need to know about exchanges, market makers, anything. You're just simply interacting with a chatbot, buying Bitcoin, and maybe putting that into a lending protocol. The experience is very chat focused or a social network focused kind of thing. Another example, there's a service on our platform called Hotornot, where they're trying to build a decentralized version of TikTok, but they have very interesting things at play. So they're saying every video that a user uploads, the audience have an ability to actually create a bet of sorts, whether this video is going to go viral or not. So they stake some money, and if the video really goes viral, then they essentially collect a much bigger pool of money. So they are basically trying to leverage these aspects around DeFi into this so you stake some money, you receive certain rewards, People are doing things like content moderation. So like you have a proof of stake, you basically stake some money, and then you are given jobs at moderating content on these social media platforms. You lose money if you don't perform well, but you gain money if you do the right thing. So I would think that it's the mix of these two words will form really the right money, social incentives for people to do stuff, and that's the kind of experiments, at least, we are seeing right now.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to check out the social media platforms myself, because I've been looking through them over the years and looking for that one that's going to break it big, and hopefully something on Internet Computer can do that, where we can finally move off these Web 2 platforms that we use, but I feel like we are reluctant to use. So wishing you all the best on that. And Lomesh, for those platforms and some of the social media ones, DeFi platforms, identity, other apps that are being developed on Internet Computer as well, how do people look? Is there a decentralized app store, or how do people find out about which apps are being built and what they can start experimenting with on the protocol?
Yeah, so we have been thinking about like a community grant for like a formal app store. Today, the way people discover these apps is like we have our own like page on the internetcomputer.org where we kind of highlight a few of our ecosystem partners. There have also been community initiatives where they have essentially aggregated a lot of these applications. So you can basically go to these sites. There's a site called Cycle where you can essentially look at all the different applications, all of the like whether they are in DeFi or building a new like a game or an NFT project. All of these are listed there. So it's like a primitive app store in the works, but we have some of those initiatives where people can discover all of these different platforms.
Very cool. And I can leave those links in the description box below as well. And we don't have a lot of time left, Lomesh, but I'm curious on what your focus and for the team moving forward. Hopefully this market trend continuation of upwards momentum of Bitcoin, Dfinity, and the market overall in 2023 continues. What are some of the main focuses for you and your team moving forward in the next coming months for the growth of the protocol and the applications?
Right. So there are two major things that we are announcing very soon, basically next month, and some of that has already started. So next month we are rolling out something we are calling as SNS, which is a service nervous system. So I mean, conceptually, you can think of it as like it's a DAO. It's a DAO platform where you can essentially decentralize any application that you have. And you can kind of give the control of that to being governed by the community. So far, the reason why you don't hear too much about the Internet Computer projects is also because most of these projects, or actually I would say like 99.9% of these projects, do not have their own tokens yet. So they have been building these products. There are lots of users interacting organically without any incentive of any token. So what these projects will start to do starting next month is that they have now an ability to issue their own tokens, delegate, basically they can also like sell a portion of their tokens, they can airdrop it to their, like, so if you've been using this chat service, you'll probably receive some airdrops and so on. And then these token holders would then get to determine the fate of this application going forward. So the developer could put in proposals. So say I'm building a chat application and I say, I want to spend my time in building a chat bot that enables people to buy Bitcoin. They would put this proposal and the community would then vote on that thing. And as soon as that voting finishes, anybody can contribute to the code and the code gets pushed. So the application updates right there and then. So this is starting to happen from next month. So we see that a lot of these applications will now start to have their own tokens, and there will be an economy that will start. So that's one. The second parallel initiative, which is like we just finished the Bitcoin integration, and we are coming up with what we are calling as a chain key Bitcoin, CKBTC. So think of this as a digital twin of Bitcoin on the ICP blockchain. So while you can have like a native Bitcoin deposited into, let's say, a DEX on IC, Internet Computer, but if you want to move that Bitcoin at the speed in these social applications or basically chat applications and whatnot, you would need something which does not really wait for every transaction to be on the Bitcoin blockchain, because then it's going to like take a lot of time. So think of this as like a layer 2 for Bitcoin, where you can essentially keep on moving Bitcoin on the ICP ledger, and you can settle at any point in time back to Bitcoin. So you can deposit Bitcoin, that's one Bitcoin transaction, move it around on ICP, and then send it back. So this is really good. And then the third thing is we are also integrating with Ethereum in the same way as we have done with Bitcoin, which means bring any ERC20 token, also any EVM compatible chains, whether they are main Ethereum or Polygon or other networks, and then basically interoperate between any of them in these. So I think some of this is really the right dry powder we need from a growth point of view in the coming few months.
Definitely. No, that sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. And good hint there about, using the applications for potential airdrops if tokens are coming out in the future. If that's not an incentive to check it out now, then I don't know what is. So I really appreciate you taking the time, Lomesh, to explain all of this about the protocol, applications, and what's coming up. I'm looking forward to seeing those releases, and I will be following along. I'll put the links in the description box below for the viewers for the protocol and some of those community platforms that you mentioned as well to check it out. And let's definitely follow up in the near future when all these updates are coming out.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, Ashton, for inviting me. I'll leave this with a quick alpha. So there is this the first application that's going to be like leveraging this SNS or basically tokenizing soon is this chat application called OpenChat, oc.app. You can essentially check it out, and I'm pretty sure there will be airdrops for some of the community members. So yeah, feel free to check it out.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lomesh, and have a great day.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. You have a great day too.